We distinguish between PubMed Central, Medline, and PubMed. Now, let's search PubMed effectively to find primary literature by narrowing your search.
One thing that's significant about Medline is that we get this controlled vocabulary that we call MESH, or medical subject headings. And the reason this is important is because there are indexers that are trained professionals in the subject, and these indexers will actually assign the most narrow mesh heading available to that article that is available on PubMed. Now, there are two ways to access mesh headings. You can either search for them through the search box, or you can actually click on the mesh database. So from the PubMed homepage, if you change to mesh, so change it from PubMed to mesh, and then you can actually search for mesh terms through the search box. So if again you search for pancreatitis, this time it's not searching the PubMed database, it's searching the mesh terms. So you can see that pancreatitis itself is a mesh term. So if I click on it, it's showing you that pancreatitis is a mesh term. It gives you the definition of how they have defined this term. So the indexers will use this definition when they tag articles. And there are also subheadings. So all of these are subheadings. So if you think, okay, pancreatitis, you're searching for articles for pancreatitis, and this is the mesh term. So the way you use it is that on the right hand side you have the PubMed search builder. So we want to use this mesh term to search PubMed. So you can actually add, because we're inside this page for pancreatitis mesh term, you just click on add to search builder. So it adds this term, the term pancreatitis, and it defines it as a mesh term. And then you can actually search PubMed. So if you click search PubMed, you can see that it basically typed pancreatitis mesh and searched, and these are the results. So it only shows you the Medline articles. So none of the non-Medline articles will show up here, because non-Medline articles are not tagged with mesh terms, and we just search for mesh terms. So anything that's tagged with pancreatitis mesh will show up here. Now let's go back. Now again, I'm under the pancreatitis mesh heading. So if I click add to search, it will add pancreatitis mesh. One thing to note is that when you add this, it will also include any of these subheadings. So if you don't want any of these subheadings and you only want the major topic, you can actually click restrict to mesh major topic, and when you click it, it doesn't change this. So make sure you delete this and then add to search again. So when you add again, instead of mesh, it says major, M-A-J-R, so or abbreviation for major. And then you search PubMed, and this time you will get fewer articles. So it only includes articles that are tagged with the major heading and none of the ones that are tagged with subheadings. Now let's go back. Another thing that happens is that these mesh terms are actually in a hierarchy. So you can see, like, in the hierarchy we are at this level, pancreatitis, and there are some that are below at the lower level. And when you are at this level and you search, it actually does automatic explosion. And automatic explosion means that it will actually include all of the levels below it. And if you don't want any of the levels below it, you can basically click do not include mesh terms found below the term in the mesh hierarchy, and that would actually disable the explosion. So if you check this first and then add to search, now it says mesh and it says no exp, basically it says no explosion, and what that means is that it's not going to include any of these down here. So now let's search PubMed, and you can see that you get fewer articles than if you were to allow it to do automatic explosion. Okay, now let's go back to PubMed homepage. Again, as I mentioned, you can actually search for mesh terms through the search box if you set this to mesh. You can also go under more resources and click on mesh database. So if you click on the mesh database, you can also, it's basically the same thing. So pancreatitis, you end up in the same page because it takes you to the mesh page. So two different ways of doing it. Now, when you do search PubMed, it's useful to use the Boolean operators, and the three Boolean operators that we use are and, or not. So the way you can think of it is that, if you think of, from abstract algebra, if you remember how group theory works and how sets are. If you think of all the articles that are related to travel and all the articles that are related to tourism, some of them cover both. So if you use the two keywords and you use the Boolean operator and, it only includes the ones that are tagged to both travel and tourism. So it's only the shaded area. Now if you use the Boolean operator or, as long as the article is tagged to either travel or tourism, it will show up. So it's all of the shaded area. And you can also use not. So if you want articles that are tagged with travel but none of the ones that are tagged with tourism, you will get this shaded area. So some articles may be tagged with both, but because they are also tagged with tourism, they will not show up. And this relationship will be more complicated if you have more than two keywords or two groups. So that's useful, and I'll show you how to use this on PubMed. The other thing is that there are also fields in PubMed, so you can so I'm back on PubMed. So if you search for pancreatitis, so when you get your search result, they're actually, the format is in summary and they're sorted by most recent. If you change the format to Medline, it actually shows you all the fields. So so one field, so for the first article, so TI is a field for title. So the title is characterization of two novel pathogenic variants. So these are all fields. So if you wanted to search in the field title field, the tag for it is TI. There's a field for PubMed ID. There's a field for abstract or AB. There's a field for full author name. There's a field for abbreviated author name, and there may be multiple authors, so there are multiple fields. And there's a field for language. There's a field for publication type. There's a field for publication location, and so forth. Now let's click back. And now in the summary format, it's just showing you the summary. So it's showing you the title, the authors. So anyway, if you wanted to know what fields are available, you can go under Medline just to show you. And the reason I say this, you can actually use the fields to search. And one way to do this, you can actually use the advanced search. So if you click advanced, it actually allows you to choose. And here's where the Boolean operators come in. So if you wanted to, if you knew somebody, an author's name, and if so you can put, author's name here, and then you can add another field. So let's say if you knew some of the, if you knew the journal. So let's say I'm just gonna type journal. So you can journal. So you can type the name of the journal, and you can say, okay, you want the author and the journal to match your search. Or if you didn't care and you said or, you can choose or, and you can say, either the author or the journal are what you're looking for, and then you search for it. And you can also add more fields. So if you click the plus sign, it adds more fields. So these are all fields. Now let's go back. So let's say you wanted to search articles that are in JAMA. So you can say, okay, I want pancreatitis, and I want them in JAMA, JAMA as the journal title. So if you put journal title, and it's not case sensitive, you can either have a lowercase or uppercase journal title, and then search. So you can see that it only shows you the JAMA journal. So all of these search results are in JAMA, whether it's JAMA surgery, one of the, JAMA has several. But first of all, JAMA stands for Journal of American Medical Association, and it has multiple journals. So it has internal medicine, it has surgery, So it's only showing you the journals by JAMA, and then it also searched for pancreatitis. So if it had pancreatitis in one of the other fields, it will show up. So that's one way. So you can see it only showed you 155 results. So I've listed some of the useful fields that you can use in your search strategy. So you use just the bracket to use them. Now remember that when you search PubMed, it does not search the full text. It only searches one of these fields, or whatever field you tell it to. So the search box in PubMed searches the fields and it searches the mesh terms, but it does not search the full text. Now there's also the concept of automatic term mapping, or ATM. So basically when you type something in the search box, it will automatically map it to three things. If it thinks it's a subject, it will map it to the mesh terms. If it thinks it's a journal, it will match it to the journal, and if it thinks that you typed an author's name, it will map it to the author. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm back on PubMed. So when we search for pancreatitis, I'm gonna click search. So these are all the search results. So we search for pancreatitis, but let's see what PubMed actually search for, because it uses ATM, or automatic term mapping. So if you go down to the search details, this is what PubMed actually searched. When we typed pancreatitis in the search box, it actually mapped it to this. So it said, I think that pancreatitis is a mesh term. So it says, okay, we're going to search for pancreatitis mesh term, or we're going to search for pancreatitis in all fields, because after all, you didn't really say you wanted mesh terms, you wanted to search for pancreatitis. So it does honor the fact that you wanted to search pancreatitis in any field, but it's also trying to help you by mapping it to mesh term. So that's called automatic term mapping. If you didn't like that, you can always modify or edit these terms and then click search. So if I only wanted the mesh term, I can basically delete this part and then click search. So then it becomes, it literally just search for the mesh term. Let's go back to pancreatitis. Or if you didn't want the mesh term, you only want to search all fields, if you put it in quotations, quotation marks will disable the ATM. So I'm gonna search. So because I put this in quotation marks, when you go to search detail, there's no mesh anymore because it disabled the automatic term mapping. Another thing you can do, so I'm just gonna use this author as an example. If you search for an author's name, so I'm just gonna paste this here. So this is an author's name which I just stole from here. So if I were to search for this, if you go to the search detail, it actually detected that this is an author's name, so it actually mapped it to the author field. So it actually, even though you only, I only typed somebody's name, it actually searched for the author. So it's showing all the articles that are published by this author. If I didn't like that, I can actually put this in quotation marks and search. I still get the same results, but it used a different search strategy. It actually searched for that name in all fields, whereas before it was only searching the author field. And then the last thing that you can do is if you actually type a journal's name like JAMA. JAMA is the Journal of American Medical Association, and if I click search, if you look at the search detail, it detected that JAMA is a journal name. So it says JAMA in the journal field or JAMA in all fields. So it's still honoring the fact that you didn't specify this is just a journal, but it's trying to help you out by saying either JAMA as a journal or this, here's the Boolean operator, JAMA in all fields. Okay. Now if you didn't like that, of course you can put quotation marks around it and then click enter, and you will see that it will only do all fields. Another way to use Boolean operators, if I go back to the mesh, let's search mesh for pancreatitis. Here, if I wanted to add multiple, I can say, okay, so I want to search for pancreatitis. Let's go inside it. I want to look at some. Let's say I was interested in classification of pancreatitis. So I'm just going to select this and then add. So you can see it says pancreatitis / classification. So that's a subheading. I want to look at either classification or diagnosis. So now I'm going to click diagnosis and I'm going to say or, and I'm going to add to search. So it kept the previous one and it says either classification or diagnosis. And you can keep going adding. So so I can say it, all of that and treatment. I want to make sure I want articles that also talk about treatment. So if I click drug therapy and then add, now you can see that here's the and, so it must include this part and the other part. And the other part, in order to meet the other part, it either needs to have classification or diagnosis. I know it has all these parentheses to make it clear exactly what the search strategy is. So you can play with this to help you narrow down your search. So if you hit search PubMed, now you only found 584 results. Now, in order to narrow it down even further, you can use all the filters on the left side. So PubMed has all these filters, and you can so I haven't used any of the filters. So if you wanted, so you see right now, after we use all these Boolean operators and the mesh terms, we have found 584 citations. If I wanted to see only the ones that are in human, all I have to do is click on human here. Now it narrowed it to 564. That's not the big of a help. But what if I only want the last 5 years? Or actually, let's say in the past 2 years. I want anything from 2017. And if you leave the rest of it alone, it will assume January 1st to now. So apply. So it's saying from January 1st of 2017. So now I only have 19 items. So you can also look at article types. So if I only wanted clinical trials, I can click this. That's too much, so now I have 0. So I can clear. So this clear is for this part. So I'm going to clear the clinical trials part. I'm back to 19. You can also customize this. So if you wanted to get into more article types, you can actually choose, let's say, I wanted, let's see. I wanted a systematic review. You show it, it adds it to here. So you can customize and add more, and then you can select. So if I want to review articles, now I'm down to 7. And it shows you that these are review articles. You can play with this. You can add language if you only wanted English. If I click English, now I'm down to 5. It turns out 2 of those 7 were in other languages. So there are all these filters that will help you narrow down your search. Now there are three ways to find the exact article. So let's say, there's an article, acute pancreatitis. So I'm just showing you that this is an article that we saw earlier. If I wanted this exact article, let me open a new PubMed page. You can actually search by the title. So I just copy pasted the title, acute pancreatitis. If you search, now this one will actually show you acute pancreatitis happens to be, it's not a very specific title. If you had let's use this as an example. So this first article, characterization of 2, if I just copy the title of it, actually let's click it. So if I just copy most of the title, so I'm not copying all of it. Let's say I copied most of the title, I'm just going to search for it. So if you search, it's going to find it because it actually uses the title matching. If it found one citation by title matching, so it actually matched the title. So I had most of the title and it matched it to this. So that's one way to find an exact article. So if you find an article that somebody's reading and you want to find it, if you know most of the title and you type it, it will actually give it to you. Another way is if you actually know the journal. So let's say I know this is a Journal of Clinical, let's see, if I paste this here, and I know this was published in 2018 and one of the authors is Bedoya, and I search, it comes here. So it still finds this. Even though I searched for this, it still brought me to this page. So there are multiple ways to find an exact article. You can also search by PubMed ID. So if you had the PubMed ID, if I just search, again it brings me back to this page.